Dulal Chandra Prabhu ki jai. Brief translation of this song we have just sung by Srinath Das Thakur. Srinath Das is saying, he who brought the treasure of divine love and who was filled with compassion and mercy, where has such a personality as Advaita Acharya gone? Where are my Sarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta? Where is Krishna Das Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against the rock and enter into the fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Sri Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottam Das simply weeps. Narottam Das. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu
Yeah. Yeah.
You want that we offer some flowers, or do you want coffee first?
Pardon me?
We have some flowers to offer to Dulal. Do you want to pass while you are chanting?
I'll offer.
You want coffee first?
I'll offer last.
Okay.
Afterwards. We can do now.
So we offer me while we sing, and
Yeah.
you offer at the end.
Yeah. You play me down. Play harmony.
While Gumas is singing, we can pass and offer some flowers. We can leave some flowers at the end for Guru Maharaj to offer as well.
Ohi Vaishnava Thakur Dayar Sagara Edase Karun Kari
Vaishnava
Ohi Vaishnava Thakur Dayar Sagara Edase Karun Kari Diya pada chaya sholo he amaya tomar charan dhari Diya pada chaya sholo he amaya তোমার চরণ ধরে বেগদমে জয় দোষ সধি জয় গুণ দেহ দাসে জয় বেগদমে জয় দোষ সধি জয় গুণ দেহ দাসে সৎসঙ্গা দেহে আমারে বসেছে সঙ্গের আসে সৎসঙ্গা দেহে আমারে বসেছে সঙ্গের আসে চাই সৎসঙ্গা দেহে আমারে বসেছে সঙ্গের আসে একাকী আমার নাকি পায় বলো হরিনাম সংকীর্তনে একাকী আমার নাকি পায় বলো একাকী আমার নাকি পায় বলো হরিনাম সংকীর্তনে তুমি কৃপা করি সদা বিন্দুরিয়া দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম ধানে কৃপা করি তুমি কৃপা করি শ্রদ্ধা বিন্দু দিয়া দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম প্রাণে কৃষ্ণ সে তোমার কৃষ্ণ দিতে পার তোমার শক্তি আছে কৃষ্ণ সে তোমার কৃষ্ণ দিতে পার তোমার শক্তি আছে কৃষ্ণ সে তোমার কৃষ্ণ দিতে পারো তোমার শক্তি আছে আমি তু গঙ্গা কৃষ্ণ কৃষ্ণ বলি ধায় তাব পাছে পাছে আমি তো গঙ্গা কৃষ্ণ কৃষ্ণ বলি ধায় তাব পাছে পাছে আমি তু গঙ্গা কৃষ্ণ কৃষ্ণ বলে ধায় তাব পাছে পাছে একাকী আমার নাহি পায় বলো একাকী আমার নাহি পায় বলো একাকী আমার নাহি পায় বলো হরি নাম সংকীর্তনে হরি নাম সংকীর্তনে তুমি কৃপা করি শরবিন্দু দিয় দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম দানে তুমি কৃপা করি শরবিন্দু দিয় দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম দানে তুমি কৃপা করি শ্রদ্ধা বিন্দু দিয় দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম ধানে তুমি কৃপা করি শ্রদ্ধা বিন্দু দিয় দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম ধানে দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম ধানে দেহ কৃষ্ণ নাম ধানে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ার সাগর এই দাসে করুণা করি দাস দিয় পদচয় সদহ আমায় তোমার চরণ ধরে দিয় পদচয় वैष्णव ठाकुर जय वैष्णव ठाकुर वैष्णव ठाकुर जय वैष्णव ठाकुर वैष्णव ठाकुर वैष्णव ठाकुर वैष्णव ठाकुर जय वैष्णव ठाकुर बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल जय बोल हरि बोल Premanande Haribo. Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanande. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Rajinulambita Bhujo Kanakabhatato Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dwijabaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunabhataro Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Gurudaya Pushpavanto Chitro Sando Tamunudo Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Abhaya Charano Soko Supado Paramanando Sundaro Subala Priyo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Varakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchan Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Krishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Shri Shri Daji Gopal Ki Jai Shri Gauri Vaishnava Guru Parampara Ki Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Something like that doesn't work very good. Push the screen this way. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. So we begin our proceedings this morning, as we have with a beautiful song of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. In this, in connection with honoring the passing of Sriman Dulal Chandra, Dulal Chandra. Add a little humor to the event. Maharaj asked me if we could offer arti to. I thought what he intended, I'm not sure, but I thought he was asking, would it be appropriate to offer arti to the picture of Dulal Chandra? And I replied, you can offer arti to a cow, which he took to mean we should offer an arti to a cow. So, a little confusion there. But I thought it would be better, given the space and so forth, to begin in this way, which Maharaj had also suggested we sing this song and offer the Pushpanjali without the arti. But after all, Hinduism is quite a worshipful culture. So it's hard not to think of anything that could be worshipped with the right understanding in the panentheistic perspective of Gaudiya Vaishnavas in particular. So today we honor the passing of Dulal Chandra, godbrother of mine and disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, our Guru Maharaj, and someone that many of you who are listening today have known, have heard his discourses. I encouraged him to record and so forth. Some of you personally served with him at a time that shortly after he connected with me, or we connected together, and some lived under his auspices there at Ananda Ashram for some time, and others may have known him even before I knew him. He's the same age as myself. He would have been 73 this year, which I'll turn in a couple of months. And well, he lived a very colorful life and a colorful Vaishnav life. Before we discuss the details of that I am privy to, and some things about him that come to my mind as I reflect on his service and fraternity. The song of Bhaktivinoda Thakur is a beautiful Bengali song in which he petitions the venerable Vaishnavas, who he describes figuratively as an ocean of grace, ocean of mercy. Someone sent me a post of a picture of Pink Beach in Indonesia. The sand was pink and the ocean was blue. And it was very beautiful. And attached to the post was the comment, maybe there are oceans of milk, because it looked rather out of the ordinary. To which I replied that milk is the liquid affection. There's an ocean that surrounds the island of Svetadweep and heart, because you need a lot of that to swim there, to arrive there. And here, that ocean of affection that surrounds Bhagwan, if you will, figuratively described as an ocean of milk that can be experienced tangibly as such as well, in a realm where such things are possible, is extended, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, through the person of the Vaishnava. In fact, the Vaishnava, with regard to the kripa, the mercy of God, the grace of God, is said to be particularly the manifestation of the mercy of Bhagavan, the grace of Bhagavan. And this refers to the devotees, the Vaishnavas in this world, who have experience of the suffering of others and who may have suffered themselves in the course of receiving the grace of the Vaishnavas, and as a result, being able to systematically participate in sadhana, which I often describe as an effort to accrue more grace. It's a very different type of practice than the sadhana or the spiritual practice of traditions such as Gyan and Yoga, which also have a transcendental goal in mind. They're very much effort-based. There's quite a difference in our effort, which is, as I say, an effort to acquire more grace. So they start us on that course. And as I say, such siddhas who have arrived at their destination through sadhana have experience of the suffering of people in the world, so they're naturally compassionate and empathetic towards them, and in ways that Bhagavan, being aloof from the world and never having suffered, and as such doesn't have direct experience of, may not be as readily able to express that empathy, but he does through the agency of his sadhana. It's not that he doesn't have compassion for the world. He knows how it works, what the problem is. He addresses it, for example, in texts like the Gita, and how to resolve it. But it particularly through his Vaishnavas, to his devotees, his Kripa Shakti, then we get more than the rationale of how to deal with the problem. We get more of an empathetic address to our plight. Of course, Bhagavan Sri Chaitanya is Krishna himself in the form of a devotee, Gaur Krishna, and he is described as such, as merciful. He is Krishna in his Acharya Leela. So certainly he is as magnanimous as and compassionate, if you will, as Rupa Goswami says when he says, Namo Mahavanaya, Mahavanaya. I've never seen someone more gracious. So this is the position of the Vaishnavas, and so we petition them for their grace. Bhaktivinoda starts here in the second stanza of his song in a very practical sense. While the goal is high, and we should know what it is theoretically, be well informed about that. After all, if we were to go there, we should know where we're going. And just poke around in the dark, right? God has no face. He must be out there somewhere. Not like that. Right? He has many faces for that matter. And a particular face and form that we are interested in as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the form of Swami Bhagavan. And he lives, as to say, in his private island surrounded by milk and affection, loving devotees. Difficult to go to, difficult to get his attention. We should know the goal, Prem Prayojan, and we should know where we are and how to proceed from this point to there. Like I've often said, if you go into a shopping center in a lot of countries, you're going to have a map that says where all the stores are. So it will say, your store is here, 108 is here, and it's going to say, and you are here. You need to know both things. So Bhaktivinoda immediately takes us to where we are. To know what we should do, what step we should take, make the next step towards our goal. It says, Chai Begadoma Chai Dosha Shari, Chai Guna Dehadasa. He begs the Vaishnava, teach me to control my passions, my six passions, my six faults. Bestow upon me the six qualities of devotion, and the six kinds, and offer unto me, give me the six kinds of devotional, of holy association. So, very pragmatic, very practical verse. I was asked the other day, as you may recall during our discussions, by Shamdas in Chile. What songs to sing? Argentina. Right, Argentina, excuse me. What songs to sing for one who is in the stage of an ardent vritti by which he could acquire the grace of Gaur and Nityananda? Well, here, this is a song to acquire the grace of the Vaishnavas through whom we know about Gaur and Nityananda. Without Gauridas Pandit, it's questionable there would be any deities of Gaur and Nityananda. The Subal Saka of Gaur Leela, who was asked by Mahaprabhu to craft the deities of himself into the Nanda Prabhu and begin this worship. So this is a nice song for that purpose. Bhaktivinoda goes on and says that Ekaki amal nahi pai bolo harinama sankirtan. I don't find it alone. I don't find the strength to carry on with the Sankirtan of the holy name of Hari. So bless me by giving me some faith, a drop of faith, which I contain the great treasure of Krishna Nam. It's said that Nam is given by Nityananda Prabhu for the price of one's faith. Bhaktivinoda talked about another nice song in this regard, the marketplace of the holy name, describing how Nityananda Prabhu has set up a shop there. He's selling the holy name for the price of one's faith. Not much in one sense. In another sense, your faith is what you are. As the Gita says, Shraddhoayam Purusha. A person is their faith. We want to acquire a faith in Vaishnavism. The person may be identified with that as a unit, personified form of such faith in the world. It serves as a beacon of light to others. With that faith and that faith alone, then we're qualified to tread the path of Nam Sankirtan. He says, concluding words then, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Krishna is yours, and you have the power to give it to me. So I'm running behind you, shouting Krishna, Krishna. Thakur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Vaishnava Thakur ki jai. So Um, with that, let me say a few words about Dulal Chandra. I met him later in his life, and we had many intimate conversations together. And in some of those conversations, he revealed to me about his earlier life, aspects of his earlier life that were very, very colorful, very, very, he would be glued to the chair to hear them. And they much involved the awkward circumstances that he found himself in an effort to pursue the beautiful ideal of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Reminds me of the idea that sometimes devotees ask about tolerance. Tolerance is a quality that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has not really asked us to culture, but mandated it of us. When he said, Trinadapi Sunichnet Tarorapi Sahishna, like a tree, Tarorapi Sahishna, be tolerant. Even if people cut you down, you can give them shade while they're doing so. However, it is also said that one should create, if you will, a favorable environment for one's practice. After having departed from my Guru Maharaj's formal mission, ISKCON, for reasons most of you are aware of, we don't need to go into, some years later, I met a godbrother who told me that, you should come back to ISKCON because there's a lot that you could grow in tolerance. I said, I got enough to tolerate in the circumstances I've created that are favorable for my practice. I don't have to go someplace to find it. It finds me. Right? The need to tolerate finds us wherever we are. So we should, both mandates are there. Create a favorable place for your practice. So don't let this idea of tolerance, don't abuse the idea by misunderstanding it and think that you have to keep yourself in a place that's not favorable for your practice. So Dulal Chandra, by force of circumstance, like many of us, have found ourselves in less than ideal circumstances that don't sound exactly like circumstances in which the Goswamis were doing their bhajan and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates were relishing Nam Sankirtan. Of course, we were part of a mission created by Prabhupada, which was an extension of the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which was envisioned, if you will, by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in terms of his desire to have a systematic way to propagate Gaudiya Vaishnavism and make it known, bring it onto the stage of the world's religions, that it might be objectively considered in terms of its theological insights. And he had confidence if he could get it on that stage, that it would shine very brightly. And we're still trying to do that. We have, to some extent, again, through the formation of a systematic mission that under the auspices of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, son and successor in all respects of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and then the extension of that went worldwide in the form of my Guru Maharaj's mission. These missions were dynamic in their scope, in terms of their intention, and certainly facilitated many devotees to come within the fold of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But in the words of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur himself, who was perhaps the first person to form a formal, hard, so to speak, institution. There was a soft form of the institutionalization of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, of course, that occurred through the pen of the Goswamis, who took the ecstasy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that I've compared to a waterfall that is just stunning, difficult to approach. But out of the waterfall of his ecstasy, they turn it into a lake that you could approach, drink from, bathe in, take advantage of it by locating that ecstasy, if you will. And there's no religious figure in the world who serves as a better example of a life of ecstasy in love of God than Sri Chaitanya. That's an objective fact. There are other ecstatic persons in the history cross-culturally of the religious world, the world of mystics, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstasy is of another order altogether. And these Goswamis, the founding acharyas, if you will, of the Sampradaya, they located that ecstasy on the map of the sacred texts and made it understandable to us to some extent, attractive, approachable by their example and their teachings and so on. So this is kind of a soft form of institutionalizing and bringing people then within the fold, but a more hard form of an institution. I perhaps, as I say, in history of the Vaishnavas, Gaudiya Vaishnavas and Bhaktisiddhanta was the first to do that, and then to take it around the world, as my Guru Maharaj did. Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj used to like to say, the idea came in Bhakti Vinod, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave shape to it, and Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada took it all over the world. And I would add, Pujya Sridhar Maharaj caused us to reflect back on it. What were its pluses and what were its minuses? Because as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur himself said, the former, if you will, of the original such institution reflected on, there's a bright side to it, there's an upside to it, and there can be a downside to it as well. And so some of the downside of that was Dulal Chandra experienced in good measure. And the stories were electrifying, if you will, disconcerting to some extent, but electrifying. There was the person sitting before you who had weathered the storm, extreme storms. He was had joined the fledgling satellite, if you will, known as New Vrindavan in its beginning days. And from there, I think he joined, what was that called? The Rockstar, I forget now. Traveling, I forget the name of it, with a bus and actors and musicians traveling around as young people would do in those days anyway, and putting to music and drama and whatnot. The road show, I think it was called, traveling road show. Vishnu Jan Swami leading the troop, if you will, which something that Prabhupada reined in at a certain point, said, I think we should close that down, that sector. And then a resident of a rural community in West Virginia, which over the decades came to be prominent, and in some ways that you wouldn't want to hear about. And Dulal Chandra was there for all of it. He was the accountant, right in the center of it all. But he served in that capacity with great integrity, more than some of the leading figures, which led to the infamy of that particular project, if you will. I mean, it still goes on today, and they've all passed through that, and it's reconfigured and so on and so forth. But it had its heyday, if you will, and there were some very difficult and awkward situations that he persevered through. To hear him speak about that was always inspired me. I mean, I knew about it. I was in the mission of Prabhupada as well. I was on the other coast, if you will, in California, I had visited there once or twice, but he lived through it all, and it's quite a story. So to hear him tell that like a survivor, it was riveting and inspiring. And I just mentioned this to you because, again, we all find ourselves to one extent or another, we may, in such circumstances, and we have to see through them, if you will, and try to create a favorable situation for ourselves, for our practice. We have that freedom, and freedom is given to us. Actually, we're charged to do that. So we should know that. We shouldn't always look just to be told what to do. We should learn to think. The Guru tells us what to think in a very rudimentary sense in the beginning, but more than that, he teaches us, or she teaches us, how to think about what to think. How to think about it. That's going to take us from the Kanishta neophyte orientation, the generous idea of a Prakrita Bhakta, material devotee. It's just like it's an oxymoron. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but Vaishnavas have in Bhagavatam has invoked this term, Prakrita Bhakta. How can it be a Bhakta and be material? Well, we find ourselves in such a situation, and we need to grow beyond it, from a neophyte orientation to an intermediate orientation, where things are no longer black and white; they're gray, but the grayness is comforting. It makes for a broader understanding of the depth of what I'm involved in, and how verses have different meanings, and there's more than one right one, and so on and so forth. So it's for thinking people, actually. Prabhupada often said he wanted to create independent, what was his term? Independently minded. Independently thoughtful persons. So keep that independence in mind and learn how to use it properly, right? That'll be beautiful. Someone wrote me today and said, I was given the opportunity, I don't know the person, but a devotee said, I was given the opportunity to teach a class of bhakti, about bhakti, in a Wiccan school here. Do you think I should do it? I said, well, use your common sense. It could be good. But, I just, so then he wrote back and said, the thing is that they want to pay me for it. And he said, so his mind is spinning. I said, just send me the money. He went on, and I just couldn't reply any further. This is for thinking people. You have to have a little common sense. You have to be like Columbus or Alexander the Great. You have to cut that knot, with a little bit of common sense. That's not very common, right? So Dulal Chandra had some common sense. He managed to get through it all, if you will. And when during that period, he married one of those, early marriages of those times, and he fathered a son. His wife couldn't hang on or see her way through to the finish of Gaudiya Vaishnavism in the way that he did, so they separated, and so his son was raised differently. We'll come back to that because it has a beautiful full circle that it comes to. But when I met him, at that time I had been visiting some devotees in North Carolina, requested as I was by Karnamrita, whom I mentioned yesterday, godbrother of mine that passed in recent times as well, husband of Archon City, who's often the moderator for the Sunday Zoom talks that we have. And we would listen to my talks or read things that I had written, and he reached out to me and invited me to come. So I came. That time they were living in Baltimore. I'd come once a year for a few days and talk. And I was able to capture Archon City's faith as well, which was comforting to Karnamrita, whose faith I already had, if you will. And at some point they moved to North Carolina, which was an interesting development there. And Dulal Chandra had been part of the development where they lived. His service was connected with the Bhaktivedanta Archive, which was set up to preserve Prabhupada's writing, its tapes, lectures, and so on and so forth. He was a participant in that. But by the time that I came there was some disagreement amongst all those involved, few in that particular project. And Dulal Chandra, and at that time his wife, Bhakti Rasa, who's still his wife, second wife, were living in another town, not a couple hours from that, what was called Prabhupada village. You couldn't have named the place worse or wrong, more wrong. It was so far from a Prabhupada village that when I came there, somebody went and stuffed all the mailboxes with propaganda against me. That no one would come to Argent City and Karnamrita's house and hear from me. This was the climate. Some came nonetheless with their cautions and with their neurosis and their understanding of what it meant, what Prabhupada's teachings were all about, and so forth, which by the grace of good association through Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj and others in my life, I had grown, as I said, to understand a little better. Prabhupada took it around the world, and Sridhar Maharaj caused us to think about it, what it really was, what the institution was for, what was its purpose, what's the goal, to think deeply about it, about all those things, he said, that your Guru Maharaj put into your heart and didn't let you think, stopped your mind, which he did. Prabhupada stopped us from thinking without trying. He just stunned us. He said, think. We just believed whatever he said. It didn't matter what he said. He had completely frozen our minds, if you will, and entered our hearts, and then come up and made us think, try to logically support, whatever he said, to the extent that we felt we had to, which wasn't very much. So he said, those things that he's put in your heart, now you have to reflect on them. Now you have to find him in his apparent absence. What is the meaning of all those things that he shared with you in depth, and so on and so forth? So he had asked me, Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, to do relief work, by which he meant, with a pained heart, minister to those who have come to Gaudiya Vaishnavism through the very broad, extensive campaign of your Guru Maharaj, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who we affectionately refer to as Swami Maharaj. Do relief work for those who have come through that campaign that are losing sight of what it's about for any number of reasons. One of them being the shortcomings that inevitably may arise in an institution, as I've been addressing. So many of you are here we're in need of relief. Practically all of my students, in some form or another, and so this is I'm getting closer now to Dulal in my life. I want to just relate a little bit of the history as it comes to me. I wasn't there yet. He was just nearby, and he used to live there and have service there. But while I was welcome at the house of Argent City and Karnamrita, other houses were a little suspicious, cautious. Some of them would come. Mahara would come with all of her questions. Gordon Ryan's beautiful mother, who I love so much. She was a book distributor in Gaudiya, in Prabhupada's movement. When I first went to New York, I was serving in Los Angeles, and I was asked to go to New York to inspire the devotees about book distribution. This is a long time ago. This is like 40, 50 years ago. And the temple was in Brooklyn at that time. So some of the devotees in New York, they were a little bit like, hey, we're from New York, you know, you're coming from LA and you're going to teach us. I didn't really have, I was asked to go there, so I went. And I was greeted at the door with that spirit by Gaur Hari, a god brother of mine, nice enough fellow, very nice fellow. But they immediately set up like a competition amongst Jadurani and the big, what's her name? Mahara, of course, and Daiva Shakti and Buddhimantu. You don't know these, but some people who are listening maybe have been around for a long time and know some of these names. So I bring them into the picture. And so we were all sent out to different places to distribute. And of course, the New York devotees were all supposed to like outshine me in numbers of books sold and so forth. And I was at the Port Authority, which is a bus depot, and then I was sent to LaGuardia Airport. It was at LaGuardia Airport that I saw Mahara selling books, and it was something different about her and Daiva Shakti also. But she stood out a little bit more to me, and I just had some regard for her and her efforts and so forth. In subsequent years, as New Vrindavan developed, and she became a member there and became a collector, I used to follow a little bit. How's Mahara doing? She was a collector, and they would post what she collected, and so on and so forth. I just had a natural kind of connection with her, but she didn't realize or know about it. I never had the chance to voice it until many years later, until these years. But anyway, I won. I out distributed everybody at the time, whatever. But Mahara in North Carolina, she would come and question and wonder, and then ask further questions of Arjun City and Karnamrita, and he actually is following Prabhupada. You know, he says it a little different, uses a different vocabulary, and this is the teaching, and you might have thought it was like this earlier. They very much helped her and so forth. And so gradually some people from the community, they came. In fact, one of the beautiful things that happened is that they were trying to build a temple in Prabhupada village, and it was like more like the Hatfields and the McCoys. It's an old saying, like from the Appalachian Mountains. Each family's got shotguns and they're warring with one another over, whatever. So there was a constant warring over philosophy. The arguments on each side weren't even philosophical in any real depth. Certainly wouldn't interest a philosopher. And they had a temple that they were trying to build, but they couldn't get it together, enough to cooperate and agree to build the temple. And so the deities that had been purchased for the temple, they were relocated temporarily in the house of Arjun City. So the deities came to Arjun City's house, and that's where I was residing and giving talks. I was coming for over the years a few times, every year at least once, maybe twice. I used to chuckle and think, they wouldn't let me go to the temple that wasn't built yet. I was not allowed to go there, but the deities for the temple came to the house, that Vaishnav house that hosted me. But they couldn't do the math. They pointed it out a couple of times, but gradually we were able to help the devotees do relief work. At a certain point, Mahara started bringing her son, going Ryan, who kind of picked up on my talks and used to relate them back to some extent to his father and say, he's hard to listen to, but if you pay attention, he's got something to say there. Mr. Singh, god brother of mine, Mahara's husband. So through this group, at any rate, of devotees in this area of North Carolina, I was introduced to the fact that Dulal Chandra, who previously served for the archives there at this so-called Prabhupada village, was living in Winston-Salem. I think it's a couple hours away, and that he had programs there every now and then. And would like to invite me. I don't know if he came to any of the programs that I gave in the Prabhupada village, but he had, and his wife, Bhakti Rasa, always like it was in their DNA, if you will, to invite Vaishnavas. And I bring this up because this is the kind of samskar that we want. The last thing we want is a samskar for keeping Vaishnavas away. That I found in that Prabhupada village, as I've explained. A samskar for doubting them. You look at the life of Prabhupada, how he explains his own childhood under the care of his loving father. What does he say about his father? His father had a samskar for hosting Vaishnavas to a fault. Anything that moved and pretended to be a sadhu, he would invite them to the house and feed them and so forth. And of course, they didn't have much to say. Well, okay, anyway, we tried. And Prabhupada saw many of those. Anyway, we tried. And he started to doubt, are there any real Vaishnavas in the world? This is the philosophy of my father and the family that I come in from the Saptagram community. Well, it was particularly blessed by Nityananda Prabhu. Some say Nityananda Prabhu came to the world to deliver that community. Prabhupada was part of that community that overflowed when the British took over Calcutta into Calcutta, and half the population was from the Sil or the Mullik family. Day family is a division of that. Prabhupada was a member of the Day family. Big group of Nityananda Prabhu's followers. But where are the real sadhus? Of course, when he met Bhaktisiddhanta at the urging of a friend, then he had an epiphany, he had a different experience. But his father, the point is, had this default, invite the Vaishnavas, invite the Vaishnavas. So I found this default valuable in Sriman Dulal Chandra and his good wife, Bhakti Rasa, who invited me. They took a chance, invite a sadhu. And they, at the time, they had a business. It was like a new age shop or something where they sold crystals and things that other people thought were spiritual and so forth. And they made a living through that. But they connected with people also who were sympathetic to spiritual, Eastern spirituality. And then they, at least monthly, they would host a program. And I was quite amazed by their house. It was set up really and primarily, as I could understand it, for those programs. It was a little little two-bedroom house, and the upstairs or the bedroom was very small, and then the big downstairs. And it was like set up for that. And Bhakti Rasa, with her enthusiasm, brought beautiful deities. I've never seen a deity more beautiful, a Radharani more beautiful deity than the Radharani of Radha of Madhava that she invited and who agreed and came there and had a beautiful throne for them, carved throne and so forth. It was quite stunning to me. And they would have a full house at least once a month. And aside from that, Dulal Chandra was giving Bhagavad Gita classes weekly, maybe like every Wednesday night, and he had a small community of people, probably coming from that larger community. Some people who became more interested, and he was teaching them Bhagavad Gita. So I was very inspired by that setup, far more than the pseudo quote unquote Prabhupada village, which was very poorly named. And I went and was well received and invited again. And gradually I got to know Dulal Chandra and Bhakti Rasa and their beautiful daughter, Bhakti Rasa's daughter, actually from another marriage, who became my disciple, Sham Saki. Some of you may know her. And very early on, I came to find out that Dulal had a vision to expand what he was doing, basically, to have some type of a community that could do what he was doing on a larger scale and so forth. And I thought that was a good idea. I had a similar idea myself and so forth. And I shared that with him and Bhakti Rasa. And of course, well, with their help, and help of some others, we acquired a property that would facilitate that. and very beautiful property in a different part of North Carolina, 3-4 some hours away. And well, we had a property, but how to develop it and the personnel and so forth. The vision was required a lot to develop it. I'm a small person myself and hardly, an organizer or a manager. Although Bhakti Ras is a very good manager and Dulal is a very good accountant. So they were good part of the picture, if you will, but they lived 4 or 5 hours away. So they contacted me and said, "Would you like us to relocate?" I said, well, I thought to myself, they're going to sell their house? They'd have to sell their business? And they're asking me, should we stay where we are? And with the money that we make, they had previously they'd been giving 50% of their income to print Prabhupada's books to the book fund. Now they wanted to give that donation to myself and the vision that we shared, and so forth. So they asked, should we move or should we just stay here and then send the money? And I thought, I said, well, there's nobody here now. If you're here, we'll at least have a base, something. So they moved. They sold their business. They sold their house. I was inspired by that example. And the house that they bought, we named it Ananda Ashram, and they turned it into an ashram. Now you have to think what that means. You're 70, let's say, years old, and Bhakti Ras, of course, is younger. Not sure her age, but their children, each from different marriages, were already grown and out of the house, and so on and so forth. And they're going to and they had a nice house, their own peace of mind, and they were doing preaching. It's all set up, it was successful. And now they're going to turn their house into an ashram. Well, that's quite a sacrifice to do, especially when ashrams in the West, they tend to have a lot of tryouts, in the door and out the back door, and you start to build something based on these young men and women have joined, and the next thing, these young men are getting together and going somewhere else. It happens, so it's hard to build with that type of a base. And we went through ups and downs, but we spent many days, especially Bhakti Rasa and I, planning and thinking about what we would do if we had the funds and the people and so on and so forth. And Dulal was always there waiting for, we'll see where the funds come, Meanwhile, this is what the books say right here, and so forth. It was very beautiful times. But anyway, this is where I got to know Dulal, and I would go there. I think originally I went there for like a month, twice a year, in the spring and the fall, and I was doing that regularly. And devotees from other parts of North Carolina would come when I was there, and so forth. We would have festivals. They organized all those festivals. Many devotees were introduced to Krishna consciousness, and many devotees were, or new people were interested. Many devotees were helped, nourished. They were given relief work that Puja Patrita Maharaj had asked me to do through my preaching and extended help I received from Dulal and Bhakti Rasa. Dulal had a very stable spiritual life in terms of his sadhana. He never let anything get in the way of that. And this was something that was very inspiring. The way he did that was to create a space for himself where there would be the least possibility of distractions. So every night at 8 o'clock, he would read for an hour when everything had settled down. And I think this was a practice that he carried with him from his previous location in the other part of North Carolina. But in this situation, it was even more required, if you will. Opportunities for distractions, problems happening. This broke, got to fix that, and so on and so forth. So 8 o'clock at night, things would settle down. He would read for 1 hour, and then he would take rest. Then he would wake up at 1 in the morning. And from 1 to 3, he would chant his 16 rounds of japa without fail, paying full attention. And then he would, I think from 3 to 5, he would read again. And then from 5 to 6:30, he would listen to one of my classes, which he was very attracted to, very charmed. He very much liked my style of presentation. As you know, most of you may know, the carryover of that was that he created the site, Shabda Brahman, where all my talks are, and they're well organized and so on and so forth, that has a lot of people go to and take advantage of those thousands of talks. There must be 2,000 or 3,000 of them on there. So he organized that. He was very, very, and also on Apple, whatever it's called, iTunes made them available and so forth. One of the services for the community of Gaudias and the public in general. Then at 6:30 he would take a 6:30 or he would take a nap till say 8:30, something like that. Then his day would start. So he had a very powerful and undistracted space that he afforded himself on a daily basis without fail to absorb himself in the sadhana and prepare for what the day might bring that could be distracting or require his attention and energy, which he gave attention and energy to many things that were going on at the time. So his schedule, his life, if you will, as a sadhaka, well, I started out, he told me the stories, electrifying stories of the circumstances that he found himself in that were really unconducive to practice, really conducive for being distracted and thinking, what am I doing here? So he gravitated towards what I underscored earlier, creating a favorable space for one's practice, right? He did this. And not at the cost of being involved in what Prabhupada really wanted us to be involved in. And Puja Patrita Maharaj, by extension, relief work. Prabhupada was outreach. Puja Patrita Maharaj was relief work, or fortifying those who, by the outreach, had come in and were looking at the back door or out the window or something like that. So he, at the same time, what I'm saying is he maintained an active life in terms of trying to fulfill what he thought would be the expectations of Prabhupada and Puja Patrita Maharaj as well, to continue the effort to share, if you will, the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to be an active participant in the dispensation of the good tidings of Gaur and Nityananda. Now, Dulal was an interesting person in many respects, a very colorful person. One of the things about him that comes to mind is that he was not a fan of health food. May sound a little odd or a little curious, but he was, one of the things about I think New Vrindavan that was good is that it really gave a strong impression for the power of Mahaprasadam. There were a lot of quote unquote prasadam devotees there who would make their testimony that the only reason I'm a devotee is because of Mahaprasadam. It was a fairly common in ISKCON idea. We were introduced to the sacred remnants and so forth, and they were good. So he was quite a fan of that. And, and that meant, well, kachoris and halava and puris and so forth. And he used to say that I like halava plain, not cardamom halava or saffron halava, or blueberry halava. I want halava plain so that I can be sure and taste all the butter. His idea was bread was a place on which to put butter, he told me. So he was, now, I don't think that was perhaps the best um, course to take in terms of his health. So there's probably a way, that you can harmonize both, right? and so forth. But it was a beautiful kind of a faith and perspective, if you will, that he had, and I appreciated it. At the same time, his health was not that good, and he was not that the kind of person who would attend to his health. Now, some may have faulted him for that, or some in the end here of his manifest presence amongst us, he did not struggle, if you will, to counteract impending death or circumstances that could be read as to say that Mr. Death is knocking on your door. He had kind of a, well, this is what it is. It's only going to last so long, and use it in the right way, and while his lack, if you will, of care for his health, which to me was evident, and I think Bhakti Rasa will support me on that. There seems to have been a positive to this, because the way he looked at it was with some kind of Krishna conscious color about it all. And I think in the end, this really carried him in a significant sense. He would tell me that his health was deteriorating. I used to like to go on a walk and talk, and he couldn't keep up on a walk, and it didn't really register with me that much. I thought, he's only my age, 70, now 73 he would have been this year. It didn't register with me that much that he was close to death. But as I think back, and especially when I think back to the last time I visited, which was only about 3-4 months ago, he was speaking about leaving the world, setting things up for his wife, making arrangements, and so forth. At that time, his wife had gone on a diet herself and a health kind of binge, and wouldn't buy other things, so he was forced to go along with it. And he looked healthier than I had seen him. He had lost weight and so forth. And he was talking, I must have been 3, 4, 5 times he spoke like this, as if he had some sense that he was going to pass from the world and it wasn't far away. And I have to say, honestly, I didn't think that was probably accurate. It didn't seem, of course, I wasn't privy to all of his health issues. I knew that he had high blood pressure and a couple of things that happened when I was there over the years visiting and so forth. But he really had a strong sense about it, and he was resigned to it happening. He was not of the persuasion to extend his life by any number of medical efforts, but rather to accept the inevitable and do it in Krishna consciousness. He intimated to his good wife, Bhakti Rasa, who's also my disciple, that he researched for sufficient precedent in the Bhagavatam and other texts for what he felt was the course that he should take, as he intuited more and more that his health was deteriorating at a rate that he would pass in short term. I mean, he was like months ahead of time, thinking this and planning it out, so to speak, going over it in his mind, it would seem. And he drew upon the inspiration of Parikshit Maharaj, who was cursed to die and could have, the teaching is, obviously with his Vaishnav power, done away with the curse that he would die in 7 days, but instead accepted it, went to the bank of the Ganges, and the result was Sukadeva appeared on the scene, and we have Srimad Bhagavatam. Something good came from it. So he looked to other precedences, and he found many of them to support him. While some others thought, as it became clear to them, that he was the likelihood of his passing in the world was considerable. Go to the doctor, get this, do something about it. You know, they have this cure, they have that. But he was not of that frame of mind at all. And he had prepared himself for months in advance. It's not that he knew mystically that he was going to die at a certain date, but there's some shadow of that, if you will, which is inspiring how he dealt with it. And just, you know, in recent times, it became critical and apparent and I was notified about it. I contacted Bhakti Rasa and started getting daily reports. And still I was a bit in disbelief that, well, you know, okay, there's a problem, but shortly I realized this is imminent. He's going to pass from the world. And I reached out to a couple of devotees in the community in North Carolina who were involved in, you know, what we had been planning to do there, which we're not going to do now. Obviously, those plans have changed in terms of building a community there. But word spread like faster than the internet, near and far. And it seems like a caravan of devotees arrived at Dulal's and Bhakti Rasa's residence to pay tribute to him. Devotees who were students of mine, who knew him through me, who knew him, some of them before me from the area. God brothers from out of state came, who knew him from previous times, from New Vrindavan and so on and so forth. And I think that as it was related to me with some even videos and pictures and so forth, that you could not have passed from the world in greater Vaishnav style. Really, he, without trying or making any effort on himself, just trying to get out of the way, so to speak. Many people surfaced, and some of them who didn't like him that much, perhaps, but knew that he was for real. You know, we have different personalities. We can't always entirely, you know, match minds with one another, but we have something greater, deeper that's in common. And he shined in that regard enough, let's say, to when news was out and about with regard to his passing, it brought a good number of devotees. And Bhakti Rasa just repeatedly described it to me several days in a row of this happening, of just a beautiful event. The Vaishnavas are so beautiful. She would say to me, the Vaishnavas are so beautiful. And his choice at the time was to listen to my lectures on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And I called to speak with him, and he could not speak, but I expressed my feelings for him, and he wept. It's just a couple of days before passing, and through his body language and so forth, Bhakti Rasa related to me his gratitude and the mutual feelings he shared of affection that we had for one another, and so it was very endearing, emotional, and before he, for a short period, became unconscious, he was conscious, listening to tapes. Devotees were coming. He was able to acknowledge them, even get up a little bit and thank them. He expressed a desire to feed the Vaishnavas. So typically, we have a feast that we provide in glorification of the Vaishnavas. He has provided this feast through Bhakti Rasa. He has to go shopping and buy for all the Vaishnavas. So we've made a nice feast. This is again he had affinity for prasadam and he'd like to see it distributed also widely. So we've offered that here on his behalf to Dowji Gopal. We'll honor it shortly, but at the point where he went unconscious for a short period of time, he was surrounded by kirtan, and Bhakti Rasa seemed to know that he was leaving just at the moment that he was. They went to his ear and whispered the Hare Krishna mantra directly into his ear. And in the middle of the mantra, before she could finish, he passed away. So in the middle is Hare. So it's in the middle of Krishna and Ram. He passed away, we can say, with the grace that's found within the Maha Mantra. And he was dressed then beautifully in a Vaishnav kirta with, Hare Krishna printed all over it, with a walking stick, almost ready to enter into his next life. There at his house, they took cared for some of our cows and so forth. And he was a participant in that type of seva as well as Bhakti Rasa was. He was more active in that field, but he had an affinity for this ideal, kind of by osmosis, by a little bit caught it. It was a little bit, my own enthusiasm, a little contagious. He caught that, and I was able to help him focus his bhajan in a way that would be very, very helpful, let us say, for such end of life course that he found himself on. So these are a few thoughts I hope that the devotees listening can appreciate and remember him for the good qualities that he exhibited, and I ask everybody to show their greatest sympathy and support for Bhakti Rasa. At this time, she is a very capable and sincere devotee with an appetite for service. So we try to help her to find her way into the next chapter of her life. And this was a big concern for Dulal Chandra. He shared with me. In the end, I told him, among other things, when I did speak with him, although he couldn't reply, I said, don't worry about Bhakti Rasa. I will take care of her. So I means all of you too, right? So this is what we do for Dulal Chandra now. Dulal Chandra Prabhu ki jai, Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Bhakti Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Vanchakalpatu